Start with immigration. With the controversies surrounding immigration in rural communities like Springfield, Ohio, how do each of you address the concerns over xenophobia along with the need for workers, especially in North Dakota, with also the concerns over strained resources in communities caused by immigration? Senator Cramer, you start us off on this one.
Sure. Well, the first immigration challenge we have to fix is the southern border. The southern border, which was fixed when Donald Trump was president 4 years ago, when Republicans had a majority in the Senate, and it was wide open by Kamala Harris as the borders are, and let 10 million people come in illegally. Among those 10 million, 1 million of them convicted felons. 13,000 of them are, in fact, convicted murderers, 15,000 convicted rapists. With regard to legal immigration, which is an important part of the point, Matt, we oftentimes don't talk about it. I've advocated many times for a skills-based, merit-based immigration system. In the United States, we allow 1 million workers to come into the United States, or immigrants legally to come into the United States. Only 15% of them are required to have a skill set or an education that's in high demand in our economy. I think we can do both. I think we can solve the southern border problem. In fact, if Donald Trump gets elected, he'll solve that in a matter of days. And I think we can also solve the workforce challenge that we have. Clearly, we have a shortage of people, a shortage of workers, and we ought to be able to have more of our legal immigrants come to the United States, not because they won the lottery or because they have a family member here, but rather because they bring a skill set, an education, some sort of an experience that adds value to the marketplace and the economy of the United States. We need them.
Katrina Christiansen.
Thank you, Matt. I think Senator Cramer showed us he does have those DC talking points in that answer. I want a secure border. I want to make sure that our communities are safe. And we had an opportunity earlier in this year, a transformative bill, a bipartisan border bill, the most conservative border bill that we've seen in 40 years. It would have given resources to Border Patrol to deal with the human trafficking crisis, to deal with the migratory crisis. It would have installed fentanyl detectors at our border to detect drugs. And it also would have given resources to the judicial system to adjudicate those asylum cases. This is the sort of thing that we should have passed. My opponent voted twice no on the bill. He turned his back on North Dakota communities. When I go to the Senate in January of 2025, I'm going to ask the Senate Majority Leader to bring back that bill because I want to protect our communities.
Okay, Senator Cramer, response.
Well, she's right about one thing. This is a stark difference. The bill that she wants to vote for, that she wants to support, that she criticizes me for voting against, actually provided an incentive for more cities to be sanctuaries. It provided new funding for sanctuary cities. Now, here's what a sanctuary city is. There are places like Chicago, New York, San Francisco. And the reason they're overrun by illegal immigrants, criminal immigrants, is because they have a sanctuary for illegal immigrants. In other words, if you're an illegal immigrant and you can make it to a sanctuary city, that sanctuary city has pledged not to cooperate with federal resources or federal law enforcement to have you removed from the city. The very idea we would fund and incentivize cities to not just allow a criminal element, but to actually provide a sanctuary for them does not keep places in North Dakota safe. It's exactly the draw that brings more people across the border. It's why we've had 10 million illegal crossings already since Kamala Harris became the border czar. The very idea that I would turn my back on North Dakotans and do something like that, people don't know me very well if they thought I would do that.
Katrina Christiansen, response.
I think we just have our second example of DC talking points. The reality is this bill was incredibly pragmatic. I think when we talk about these sorts of things like the bipartisan border bill that would have stopped fentanyl from coming into our communities, that would have given the Border Patrol more than 1,400 new agents to deal with the migratory crisis, that's the pragmatic part. That's what North Dakotans want in the Senate. They want somebody who's willing to join with the other side and solve problems and stop fentanyl from coming in. The idealist, the talking point stuff has to stop. We have to solve this problem. We need to do this. We should have done it in May, but when I go to DC in January, we'll get this done.
We have a lot of topics to get through, so I'm going to go to the next one. Let's move to the recent ruling by a North Dakota judge. The North Dakota 6-week abortion ban should be vacated and ruled unconstitutional. I know You both share different views on this topic, and the voters want to hear them. So tell me your reaction to this first, and also what state or federal guidelines would you both favor regarding this controversial issue? Katrina Christiansen, you start us off this time.
So I support that women should have access to the health care that they need when they need it. Since the overturning of Roe, we've seen these really poorly written bans passed in states across the country. And we've also seen news story after news story of women being denied life-preserving care. And most recently, women actually dying under really restrictive bans. We've seen people have to be life-righted from Idaho to Utah. We've seen people have to drive from Oklahoma with cancerous tissue that won't be removed to Kansas to get treatment. We've heard about people being denied care in hospital parking lots. This isn't the United States of America. These things don't represent North Dakota values. We've also seen a backlash towards IVF care and birth control. We need to have access to health care as women. It's very complicated. And I think it's important that this ban be overturned here in North Dakota. And I also think at the federal level, we need to protect women's access to health care, including IVF.
Senator Cramer, response.
Well, first of all, you brought up a state case in a federal race. So that'll be up to the Attorney General of North Dakota to defend North Dakota's law in district court. My understanding is they're going to appeal it. We'll let that work its way through. The overturning of Roe versus Wade actually gave states that right. By the way, the Constitution of the United States was written for states to create a federal government, not the other way around. So states' rights is very important to me. I am pro-life, but I'm also a solution-oriented pro-life Republican, because which is exactly why I'm a co-chairman with Amy Klobuchar of the Adoption Caucus. It's why I introduced legislation to make deadbeat fathers accountable for their unborn children. It's why I've worked with Senator Tammy Duckworth on providing financial aid for purchase of things as basic as diapers for babies. I think we have to be compassionate about life, and I think we need to have a culture of life. My opponent likes to talk about Washington, D.C. talking points. She just rattled off the most far-left radical talking points of the pro-abortion industry in America. She's the corporate person here, not me. She's the one using talking points, not me.
Katrina Christiansen.
I don't think anyone on this stage is pro-abortion, and I think it's quite frankly disrespectful to label me in that way. I have given birth to 3 children, but what I do think is that people deserve access to health care. They deserve to live their lives the way that they want to, and to know that when they need health care, they can get it regardless of the state that they live in.
Senator Cramer.
Well, I want to add something to the IVF point she keeps making, because she brought up IVF, she brought up contraception. No Republican, nobody ever has opposed those types of freedoms. The one entity that has brought them up, though, is Chuck Schumer, the majority leader. She can't wait to work with. He has brought up twice an IVF bill called something like the IVF Access Act, which is a Trojan horse that most everybody would agree is awful if you look at the details. Here's what it does. It guarantees access to all forms of what are called ARTs, assistive reproduction technologies. That includes human cloning. That includes gene editing. It prohibits states from even regulating those things. States as liberal as Colorado regulate them. States as conservative as Texas regulate them. This is another states' rights issue. But here's the big thing. There's not a single state in the country that prohibits access to IVF or ARTs or to contraception. So this, again, talking points from the radical left so that they can push their radical leftist agenda and push their doctrine, if you will, on this very important issue of life.
Christiansen, do you want one more response on this?
I think it's really important that Senator Cramer, who co-sponsored a 2021 national abortion ban, answer if he would consider voting to pass another national abortion ban. You say that you support states' rights, but you co-sponsored a national abortion ban.
Sure. So when it comes to the protection of life, I assume I can do this as well.
You have the last word on this.
Oh, good. Okay.
Move on to the next.
Yeah. So I do believe that life is worth protecting. I am pro-life. I don't apologize for that. North Dakota is pro-life. I do think there need to be guardrails. I think that you can have the exceptions that have been around for 50, 60 years to consider rape, the life of the mother, obviously incest. But I also think you have to recognize that a baby is a human being at every stage of life, including pre-life. And we can work these things out and find some appropriate protection with appropriate guardrails and appropriate regulations. But I am pro-life. I don't apologize for being pro-life. I think we ought to have a culture of life.
Okay, let's move to the next topic, inflation, the economy, one of the key issues in the presidential race that we're hearing, and of course a federal issue as well in the country. Some argue excessive government spending has led to inflation, yet North Dakota is a key beneficiary of government spending. How do you two reconcile these two issues, and how, as senator, would each of you work to get inflation under control? Senator Cramer, you start this time.
Sure. First thing we need to do to get inflation under control is to actually cut some of that free government spending, particularly this mandatory spending on what used to be the discretionary side of the budget. But the first thing and the best thing you can do to curb inflation is to grow the economy of the country. And you can do that by reducing taxes. You can do that by reducing regulations, the overbearing regulations that have overwhelmed many in the agriculture industry, many in the energy industry. We've actually transferred much of our opportunity for mining, for extracting of minerals, for growing food to other countries because we make the cost so high with regulation. Fortunately, our Supreme Court has overturned a number of bad things, such as the Chevron doctrine, such as the waters of the United States, such as the North Dakota versus EPA using the major questions doctrine, where they gave rights back to the states. And I think that go a long ways to growing our economy and curbing inflation.
Katrina Christiansen.
I totally agree that prices are too high. I go to the grocery store, I buy groceries for 3 kids every other day, and I feel it. And I most acutely felt it when I had to buy a new car. And I'd only had this car for about 3 years, and the interest rate was 3% higher on the car that I had to buy. And it cost $7,000 more. The reality is, what we need are senators who are willing to deal with the consolidation and the lack of competition that we have in our marketplace. My opponent, I think, went to DC with really good intentions. He's taken over $2.3 million in corporate PAC donations. 130,000 of that came from big banks. And I have to wonder, is he really serving the state of North Dakota and North Dakotans when he's had those donations? He was upset about the Fed lowering interest rates earlier this summer, and he was upset when they did lower it. What Senator Cramer doesn't understand, because he hasn't had to work for a living, is that for every increase the Fed has, our small businesses, our farmers lose out on future growth. It's time to send Kevin home.
Senator Cramer.
So those credit unions are awfully large banks, Matt. And the independent community banks of rural North Dakota are not real large banks. Even the North Dakota Bankers Association is made up pretty much of pretty much local banks. So yeah, am I on the banking committee? You bet. Am I on the banking committee to look out for the little guy every day of the week? Now, inflation is the result of overcharging on the demand side of the economy. That's what they did with the IRA, interestingly named in the Inflation Reduction Act, really Inflation Enhancement Act. That's what they did with the American Rescue Plan, and they were warned. They being the Democrats, 100% Democrats, 0% Republicans, voted for those 2 bills that supercharged, put fuel on the fire of inflation in this country. Warned by Democratic economists that said that this was going to cause an inflation problem. It's the inflation then that drove the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates. They should have started sooner. They could have done it more modestly. They chose not to. I know how to fix the inflation problem. Elect a Republican majority.
Last word on this, Katrina Christiansen.
Yes, I think, Senator Cramer doesn't want to address the fact that he didn't fight the 2018 tariffs that destroyed the soybean market for farmers in North Dakota. We lost $6 billion worth of revenue for our farmers with those tariffs. It's incredibly dangerous. And the fact that it caused inflationary pressures in the United States. Tariffs are really dangerous. Kevin talks about fighting for North Dakotans, but we didn't hear him fighting for those soybean farmers in 2018. They've lost those markets. They're no longer there for us. And right now, soybean farmers are dealing with prices that are 20% below profitability. We need to send somebody to Washington, D.C. that understands agriculture, understands markets, understands competitiveness. It's time to send Kevin home.
Senator Cramer, I have to respond to this because she just made a terrible error. There are 535 members of the United States Congress. In 2018, when the tariffs were levied, and the Department of Commerce had hearings on these tariffs, 534 members of Congress didn't show up. One did. That was me. I was literally, and I was in the House of Representatives at the time. I was literally the only member of the United States Congress to stand up and oppose and ask for waivers and ask for adjustments related to products that are important to North Dakota at the Department of Commerce. And by the way, they heard that, they listened to that, and they did provide some of the waivers. And with regard to tariffs, the very idea that we wouldn't use tariffs on a country that's dumping on our country products too cheaply, that's exactly what tariffs are for, is to defend our industries in the United States of America.
Last word on this,
yes,
so we need to move on.
I would like to have the last word.
So
he talks about reshoring manufacturing and producing things here, but Senator Cramer voted against the CHIP Act. In the United States of America, we do the best innovation. We should be reshoring manufacturing, and that's what the CHIP Act would have done. And it would have helped with some of the supply chain pressures that we experienced following the pandemic. It's really important that we bring that production back to the United States of America, that we drive innovation, that we drive growth, and we drive revenue. Those are the real solutions to innovation, not talking points.
Now we need to move on to farming, and you can continue this if you want. So let's talk farming. It's been mentioned already. Farm economy. How do each of you stand on continuing farm subsidies? How crucial is farming in the state? And what do you think of the next farm bill? And you can continue this tariff talk if you want. Katrina Christiansen, go first on this one.
You know, I'm an agricultural engineer. I love to talk about the Farm Bill. I get very excited. I've met with so many ranchers and farmers as I've been campaigning around the state. And one of the things that I think is really important to note tonight is that we don't actually have an authorized Farm Bill. It's because of career politicians like my opponent who can't seem to keep the government open, who can't seem to raise the debt ceiling. And every 5 years, they're supposed to pass a farm bill. And we don't have one right now. How incredible is that? One of North Dakota's most important industries does not have an authorized federal farm bill. But if we were to have one, and we will when I go to DC, we need to make sure that we adjust those reference prices so that our growers are doing okay. We need to make sure that we have dual enrollment for POC and ARC programs. And most importantly, we need to reinstate country of origin labeling. My opponent voted to repeal country of origin labeling for beef and pork in 2015. And when he did that, he put our national security at risk because a country cannot have national security without food security.
Senator Cramer, response.
Sure. First of all, the reason we don't have a farm bill is because the Democratic chairman in the Senate, Debbie Stabenow, she did really the cardinal sin of farm bills. In the middle of the farm bill, they changed the baselines on the non-farm parts of the farm bill. They added so much money. This is part of IRA and the American Rescue Plan that fueled inflation. They now have SNAP at 80% of the farm bill. SNAP has nothing to do with farmers. This is an important program, but that changed the baseline, diluting the money that goes to the farmers. Then she added a whole bunch on the conservation title, which she calls the climate change title. The conservation title, which makes the conservation title now the same amount of money as the crop insurance program. I agree with Katrina on this. We need to raise those reference prices. They've got to reflect the modern costs of an additional, 25-30% of input costs because of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's inflation. Those input costs have gone way, way up. So we need to do that, and we also need a robust crop insurance program that provides a little more of a subsidy, frankly, premium subsidy, again, to reflect the risk, because that's what the banker needs. The banker needs to know that they'll get paid back in case of a disaster. With regard to the country of origin labeling, we had to repeal it because it was not WTO compliant. So she says there's a national security risk. We were running a major cost risk for our producers if we allowed the WTO to fine them for being in non-compliance with the trade deal with the other WTO countries.
Response from Katrina
Yeah,
Christiansen.
I think Senator Cramer is upset that he turned his back on North Dakota ranchers. In 2015, when he voted to repeal the country of origin labeling for our beef and pork, consumers don't know where they're getting their meat from. First of all, that's something that's important to point out here. But he took $6,000 from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association in 2015. Now that's perfectly legal, but that doesn't make it right. That's not a North Dakota value. We have almost 8,000 independent ranchers here in North Dakota. And since we don't have country of origin labeling, they've lost out on about 35% margin. You know, that's an incredible amount of money for independent beef producers. And I will always support our beef producers. That's the first bill I'm going to introduce when I go to DC.
Okay, last word on this, Senator Cramer.
So these awful National Cattlemen Beef Association are the 8,000 ranchers she's talking about. You don't get to, on the one hand, be against them, and on the other hand, be for them. This is not a unifying message even within ranch country, because most North Dakota ranchers want access to the markets that they want access to. The legislation she's talking about would actually prohibit them from having that freedom. We need to make sure that our ranchers can market the way they want. I've been a major sponsor, in fact, lead introducer of legislation to knock down the barriers for more opportunities to market our beef as well as other products. It's an ongoing fight. It will eventually get settled, probably somewhere in the middle of the two positions that we're talking about right now.
Move on to the next question comes from our co-sponsors, AARP North Dakota. The Social Security Trust Fund is expected to see a shortfall in 10 years. If Congress doesn't act, millions of Americans who are counting on Social Security will see cuts to the money they've earned. Do you see a path for Congress to work on a bipartisan solution to protect Social Security for those who have earned it? Senator Cramer, you start this time.
I do. I just recently received for the I don't know, second or third time, but just this year, the Fiscal Hero Award specifically for my work in this area. It's an award that comes from Citizens for a Responsible Budget, that is awarded to people as conservative as Mike Braun and James Langford, and as liberal as Sheldon Whitehouse and Gene Shaheen. It doesn't go to a lot of us, but it goes to us because we're willing to have this discussion. That in a little bit you're going to hear demagogued, because that's the rich tradition, as to somehow say, you know, Cramer and the Republicans are going to throw grandma over the cliff. We can get this done, and we can do it, but we have to put everything on the table. Now, she's going to say I'm for cutting benefits. Here's what I suggest. What I think we ought to do is take a serious look at the retirement age. Right now, it takes, if you're my age, there are people that have a lower number than this, but at 67 years of age, you can get full benefits. I say let's look at 10 years out from now. Let's start adding maybe 1 month a year for 6 years. That would provide I think it recognizes the longevity of life. The other thing we can do is look at raising the cap of eligible income that is taxed for FICA. Right now it's about $168,000. I think we can raise that, and we can do it over the course of time. Now, my right-wing friends say that's a tax increase. My left-wing friends will say I'm cutting benefits. Both are doable.
Katrina Christiansen, response.
You know, I think one of the things that I think about when I think about Social Security is this widow that I met when I was campaigning earlier this summer. And she told me this story about how she became a widow with a 2-year-old, and how Social Security benefits for her were a family benefit. They helped her figure out, they gave her time to grieve and figure out what she was going to do with her life. And I think it's really important that we always protect Social Security. If you send me to DC, I will not let Social Security be privatized. I will not let it be sunset. You know, my opponent here claimed to have been bipartisan, yet he didn't vote for the bipartisan border bill. And he claims we can get this done. We just talked about the fact that there is no authorized farm bill right now. The reality is we need somebody who has a record of getting things done, like I've done in the private sector, on really short timelines or long ones. We can increase the wage for Social Security income taxes. A person that makes $147,000 a year always pays 6.2%. But a millionaire, somebody who makes $1 million a year, only pays 1%. And I think we can correct that. I think we can remove the cap and save Social Security in perpetuity. Senator Cramer responds.
So that wasn't much of a solution. I'm with her. I think we can certainly raise that cap, and we can index it. We can continue to raise it a little bit each year. You can't do anything overly abrupt, because in order to make Social Security whole, remember, I think she skipped this part of the question. It's insolvent in 9 years, not 10 anymore. It's now 9 years, and to make it solvent for the 75-year projection would require today a 28% tax increase on the taxable income, or a 21.3% benefit cut. Neither one of those are tenable, Matt. But we can have them. And by the way, with regard to bipartisan solutions, I am the only North Dakota Republican in history that I know of, and the only Republican senator last Congress that received the Bipartisan Policy Council's award for legislative action because of things like this. That's the same reason I've received the Fiscal Hero Award, for things like this, because I do sit at the table, because I do solve problems. And by the way, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, I helped write. In fact, probably had more fingerprints on that bill than any other member of the United States Senate, at least in the Transportation Subcommittee that I co-chair.
Your last word on this, Katrina Christiansen.
I just think North Dakota, we can do better. We can send somebody to Washington, D.C. that understands that 1 in 6 North Dakotans are seniors. My opponent voted against capping prescription drug prices for Medicare recipients. Those are senior citizens. I will never turn my back on the seniors in North Dakota. And I just want to point out one small thing. He keeps bringing up this Fiscal Hero Award. I'm not sure if it was a joke or not, because since Senator Cramer's been in the Congress, the debt has increased $20 trillion.
All right, let's do a second question from AARP North Dakota. 48 million Americans help their loved ones each day to remain independent in their homes and communities. These family caregivers sacrifice time and money and provide $600 billion annually in unpaid support. How would you help family caregivers? And Katrina Christiansen, you start this time.
You know, Matt, this is a really serious topic. When I was in Kenmare on Monday night, I had the opportunity to meet this woman, and she told me about her experience taking care of her partner, her husband, who had Parkinson's and Crohn's disease, and she was able to keep him at home for about a year, but then she had to put him in a nursing home. She just couldn't do the care anymore, and she had to sell $500,000 worth of farmland to pay for that care. She gave away part of her children's inheritance. And I think what's lacking in our discussion about elder care is knowing these faces. I spoke to a woman in Bismarck who had been at home for 2 weeks taking care of her husband. And I think what we need is we need to make sure that those caregivers have respite, that they're also able to probably continue to earn some Social Security while they're taking unpaid leave, taking care of family members. We need somebody who's willing to get innovative with solutions and talk to people and try to understand the different sorts of solutions we need for different sorts of caregivers and family problems.
Senator Cramer responds.
So this is an area where I agree just about with everything she just said, and have worked very closely on, particularly on the Veterans Affairs Committee. It is untenable to me that somebody could be, and this is an important point, not just providing compassionate care for their loved one, but literally saving the taxpayers of the country money doing so. That deserves the same financial reward as they're providing for us. And I've worked hard on legislation to do exactly that, where there haven't been enough people at this point to push the issue, but we've pushed it hard with CMS. And by the way, with regard to the caps on prices, so you're right, I voted against an arbitrary cap on drugs. But since that happened, the premiums of the insurance to cover those drugs have gone skyrocketed, 382% in one case. In fact, the money to pay for some of that stuff was taken out of Medicare, which was scheduled to go insolvent in 2036, probably escalated that timeline. The most recent bid for Medicare Part D was an 85% increase. The most recent premium increase was 30 or 35% increase. You cannot simply shift the cost and expect the price to actually come down.
Katrina Christiansen.
So I think Kevin has forgotten who he represents. Like I said before, 1 in 6 North Dakotans is a senior citizen. And the CBO, the budget office for the federal government estimates that capping prescription drug prices for our seniors is actually going to save over $100 billion. That's an incredible amount of savings for taxpayers. And so I would have voted to cap prescription drug prices. In fact, yesterday, when I was in Minot, I met a younger gentleman who had diabetes, and he had lost vision because he was having to ration. He was having to ration his insulin. It was $1,500 a month, and he's lost 70% of his vision. And my opponent voted against capping insulin prices at $35 an hour. I just think he's changed since he went to DC. It's time we send someone else who's willing to remember who North Dakotans are and what North Dakotan values are.
Last word on this, Senator Cramer.
So this is great rhetoric. As you notice, he's got a little bit of a cadence going, a little bit of a little bit of a rhetoric. But the facts matter, Matt. And it isn't $100 billion. By the way, they're claiming $60 billion now, or $6 billion. I mean, that's saved. And by the way, that's not from all 10 drugs that were on the list, but rather only 3 that they've done that are creating these quote savings. But these savings are being taken out of Medicare. So in other words, you take the money out of Medicare and then pay somebody else over here. You're not saving anything. You're just shifting the burden. And frankly, it's irresponsible. We need a much more thorough solution than the simple, talking points from the Democratic Party on this. This is serious stuff. And to consider that Medicare is going to be insolvent in about 11 or 12 years if we continue down this path. So I think there's more to be done for sure, but price caps, arbitrary price caps without a pay for is not the solution.
And you need to move to foreign policy. What are each of your views on 2 huge issues right now, the Russia-Ukraine war and also the Israel-Hamas conflict engulfing Gaza? Senator Cramer, you start us off on this one.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, there should be no mistaking that these 2 wars are the direct result of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's pathetic, botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. Donald Trump had a deal with the Taliban with benchmarks they had to meet in order for us to withdraw. They never met them, but Joe Biden couldn't wait to get out of there and take some credit. Well, he got credit, all right. He got blamed, and he projected weakness. And that projection of weakness is exactly why Vladimir Putin felt empowered to take on Ukraine. It's exactly why Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran feels emboldened to not just to take on Israel, but to take on the United States of America in the Red Sea, in Jordan, in Iraq. They're brazen about it. So I think we need to do a lot. I think the world's safer when America's strong. I think that we owe it as a matter of contract through the Budapest Amendment or Budapest Memorandum, as well as our role in NATO to defend Ukraine, to do everything we can. I think that Joe Biden has been trickling out a little bit of aid here and there with the expectation of a soft defeat. Ridiculous. Ukraine needs to win this war and needs to drive Putin back. And we need to do everything we can to help Israel, including providing the weapon systems to use any way they see fit to take out Ukraine or to take out Iran and Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis.
Katrina Christiansen.
Yes, I think we just heard some DC talking points there. The reality is, I'm a history buff, and one of the scariest books that I have ever read was Midnight at Chernobyl. Like, there were times when I had to put it down. The most important thing in terms of protecting democracy right now is making sure that a bloodthirsty dictator does not succeed in Ukraine. It is important to our national security interests that we continue to support Ukraine and defeat Russia, because Putin won't stop there. He'll spread his attacks to other places in Europe. And if we allow that to happen, we allow other bad actors to start behaving badly. China wins, North Korea wins, Iran wins. And it's really important that we put our support behind Ukraine, because that puts America first. That allows us to focus on our future, where we want to be innovative, we want to grow, we want to do amazing things. I do not want to see people like my son, who's 16, be enlisted to go fight in another world war. It's incredibly important that we stand with Ukraine.
Senator Cramer responds.
So I think she just basically said what I said. We've got to stand up through Ukraine because we have a moral obligation, we have a contractual obligation, and it's what's best for the United States and certainly for the NATO alliance. We do have to make our NATO allies do more and they've been stepping up. They started when Donald Trump insisted on it. At the same time, the Hamas and every dictator in the world is watching how pathetic our response has been to Ukraine, because this president gives them weapons and then says, but you can't use them in these ways. Or he says, well, you're going to get F-16s. Oh, but wait for a couple of years. We need to train the pilots. There's a total disconnect. And so, yeah, we need to bring peace through strength to all parts of the world, but we cannot do that under current leadership in this country, because he projects weakness. Just today, he's already calling on Israel to only respond to the Iranian attacks of 200 ballistic missiles just the other day in a proportionate way. Can you imagine such a thing? Proportional? So in other words, if they shoot one missile, you can shoot one back? How about we wipe them out? The only ceasefire that we should accept is a white flag hanging over Tehran. That they want us eliminated, they want Israel eliminated. We should take care of it. We should make sure that we get a white flag over Tehran. And we can do that, by the way, with peaceful means, by taking out their oil supplies. They were all but broke when Joe Biden came into office. He unleashed their ability to sell their oil. They sold it to not just anybody, to our enemies, emboldening Russia, emboldening China, and then filling the coffers to kill Americans and Israelis.
Last word, and then we'll move on.
I appreciate that. I think Senator Cramer kind of jumbled up some things there. I think the important thing here is that when it comes to the conflict with Israel and Hamas, the most important thing that we need to have right now is a de-escalation of all the escalations. Innocent people are dying. The hostages haven't come home. And what we need is a ceasefire. And then we need to start to peel back that healing process, that peace process can be at center, but not until we have a ceasefire. And so those are the things that we need to focus on.
All right, let's move to the energy industry, so crucial in North Dakota, energy independence for our nation. Tell me each of your views on how to expand North Dakota's energy industry, and how do fossil fuels and renewable energy play into that? Katrina Christiansen, you start us off this time.
Yes, so I'm a North Dakotan, and so I understand just how important our energy economy is. I've had the opportunity to work in an ethanol plant. I climbed in so many unit operations in my first job as a plant engineer, and I get it. Natural gas made steam for our ethanol plant. It ran our reboilers that helped us distill the ethanol. It was an incredible learning opportunity. And so what I think is really exciting about North Dakota is we have so much natural gas. It's such a good fuel. It has a lot of energy in it, and we can do so many things with it. So I think the opportunity is to continue to invest in North Dakota's all of the above energy policy, and we should invest in things. We love capitalism in North Dakota, and we are always changing what we're doing. We're always learning. We're always growing, and there's such an opportunity with new technologies coming online. I just want us to participate in that and continue to win and grow North Dakota's energy economy.
Senator Cramer responds.
That was a nice, happy talk, little speech, but there are serious problems. She didn't address a single federal issue, and the federal government is the thing standing in the way of these investments that she's talking about. It's why we don't have permitting reform. The federal government, this administration, has banned liquid natural gas terminals from being built to export natural gas. We provide the cleanest natural gas in the world. Vladimir Putin's natural gas is 50% dirtier than America's, and yet Joe Biden has transferred his climate guilt to Russia to meet the demands of Europe. I'd much rather use the peaceful tools of energy development than the weapons of war every day of the week. You want to really make America's entire economies sing. Take a lesson from North Dakota. The problem is the federal government. It's the bureaucracy. This is why overturning the North Dakota versus EPA or finding for North Dakota versus EPA, overturning the Obama rule. This is why waters of the United States being overturned that freed up about 90% of what were considered federally jurisdictional waters or lands in the country was so important. And this is why the Chevron doctrine, overturning that, was so critical, because the agencies were making laws where laws don't exist. Same thing with with the major questions doctrine. And the Supreme Court said, you don't have authority that wasn't granted you by Congress. Now, if we can get rid of all that bureaucracy, North Dakota can lead the way. They already do in many respects. Look, I was an energy regulator for 9 years in North Dakota. I oversaw about 2,000 megawatts of wind development in North Dakota. I cited lots of pipelines, including the original Keystone pipeline, 600 landowners' land. Not a single inch of it had to be condemned or taken through eminent domain. North Dakota does it right. The problem is North Dakota's problem is the federal government standing in its way.
Katrina Christiansen with a response.
So when I listened to Senator Cramer's answer there, I heard the federal government come up as the problem multiple times. Kevin, I think you've been in the federal government for over a decade now. And so I'm struggling to understand why North Dakotans should continue to send someone who has so much trouble changing the rules and improving the opportunity for North Dakotans. I think it's really clear up here. I think Kevin had really great intentions when he went to DC, but it's time that we have somebody who has problem-solving experience, that understands return on investment, that understands energy projects. I worked on capital projects that were over millions of dollars. I get the sorts of things that we need to do to grow our energy economy.
Last word on this, Senator Cramer.
So I need to help her now, because she says that I've been in the federal government for 10 years. I've been an elected representative for North Dakota in the Congress of the United States for 12 years. The federal government executive branch is the problem that have been creating all of these barriers. I mean, it was Joe Biden that absolutely put a ban on drilling on federal lands and offshore. Of course, that was overturned by a judge as well, finally. But then they started just allowing the bare minimum of the least productive areas to be bid out for drilling and exploration. The problem is the executive branch, not the elected branch, by the way, not the congressional branch, but the federal bureaucracy that's gotten way too big, way too expensive, way too powerful, and way too out of touch with what matters and what we can do so well. You guys, we produce the cleanest energy in the world. If we care about climate, if we care about greenhouse gas emissions, we should drill more in North Dakota. We should produce more oil, more gas, more wind, more solar, if that's what it takes. Whatever we can produce in North Dakota, we ought to unleash the innovators and do it. But we've got to get the federal government out of the way.
I want to throw both of you a little curveball here for the next topic. It's more of a statewide legislative issue, but it's getting a lot of attention. I want to get you both on the record your thoughts on ballot measure number 4, which would eliminate property taxes in North Dakota. One response from each of you. Senator Cramer, you go first.
I mean, I'm going to be honest, man. I'm actually undecided about it. I've been talking to a lot of people. I've been studying it closely. I know how much my property taxes are and how much they go up. I think there'd be a consequence to passing measure number 4 that some people maybe don't believe. At the same time, the elected leaders in Bismarck have had the opportunity to try and fix it. So I don't know how this is going to play out, to be honest with you. Tonight I really am undecided, but as you can probably tell by my answer, I'm probably leaning to supporting it, quite honestly, because I think you need to do something big to get change that the people of North Dakota are demanding.
Katrina Christiansen.
You know, I have 3 kids in Jamestown. I have a kid in high school and middle school, and a kid in elementary school. And one of the things that I love about living in Jamestown is I get to know the teachers. I get to know them really well. My kids all went to the same elementary school, and I know that this is a stressor for them. They're really worried about what happens if Measure 4 passes. And I am too. I don't like paying property taxes. When I told my parents what we paid, they were incredibly shocked. They said, oh, you have all that oil money. Yeah, but they've never met any of the legislatures that are in the supermajority from Bismarck. We need to deal with the property tax issue. And there are solutions. Okay? But I'm not sure that Measure 4 is the thing. I value the public employees. I value the people who plow snow every blizzard. I mean, I appreciate them so much. I don't think I can vote yes on this, but I can be vocal about the fact that we do need comprehensive property tax reform, because I know so many seniors who live on fixed incomes and are so frustrated with the lack of response in Bismarck to their cries for help.
All right, we have time for a couple more topics. I want to try to get to a couple more. Question about North Dakota's public schools. Teachers are leaving or retiring or quitting. We hear this all the time with the profession. Some buildings are aging. Funding is always an issue. What are each of your views and solutions on funding for public schools and retaining teachers in the state? Katrina Christiansen, you start first.
This is a really great question. I'm so glad you asked. Actually, one of the reasons that I decided to become a politician, to run for federal office, is because I was really worried about the funding in my son's school after the pandemic. There weren't the resources. Currently, there's not a speech teacher in my son's school in person. At my son's high school, there isn't a Spanish teacher. Last year, he took it online, and it was so frustrating for him. It was really discouraging to see him struggle with that class online. And so I think what we need to do is recognize the power of the federal government. We can fully fund education. There are things that we can do to help out the state of North Dakota, to help our teachers, to help our students. We can fully fund special education. We haven't fully funded since we passed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act in the 80s. We've never done that. We need to do that. We also need to increase our funding for Title I spending. 4 out of the 5 elementary schools in Jamestown are Title I wide schools. This is how I can help my community. I look forward to it.
Senator Cramer, response.
Well, first of all, you brought up another state and local issue in the context of a federal debate, and there's an awful lot of federal money that goes to our local school districts through the state. The last thing that I'd want to do is federalize our local education system, which is exactly what she just advocated for, because none of that federal money ever comes with no strings attached. They come with lots of strings attached. In fact, in some cases, I hear more from superintendents about how can we get rid of the bureaucracy and just get the money. I think we can block grant money from the federal government to the states for distribution to the local schools in a way that makes sense for the local schools and for the state. But the last thing you want is a top-down federal government issue. And by the way, we have a $35 trillion debt that we're coming up on. We can't fund every issue in the state of North Dakota or throughout the country. We have to start making the hard choices at a time when our interest on our debt is now going to be greater than our national defense budget, at a time when the world's on fire and needs America's leadership.
Right, kind of time for probably one more topic here. North Dakota's largest city, Fargo, has seen its homeless situation and population getting worse the last few years. Bismarck's now looking at an encampment a measure as well. What are the solutions, if any, from a federal level to these problems within Fargo and Bismarck? Senator Cramer, you start.
Well, first of all, for the most part, there are local and state solutions, and there need to be. These are community issues. But what role could the federal government play? One of the areas that I've worked hard on in the Banking and Housing and Urban Development Committee with my friend Chris Coons, a Democrat from Delaware, is sort of changing our Section 8 low-income housing program to incentivize more building of infrastructure that can house people at a lower income level that's heavily subsidized. And this doesn't subsidize the landlords, so to speak, but it does reduce the burden of regulation and the things that really, frankly, make it unprofitable for people to build more low-income housing. That's one area. Beyond that, what we need to do is that charities be charitable. We need to have a tax code that rewards community activities like this. Instead of punishing good behavior, we ought to be rewarding good behavior. And but the last thing, again, you need from us is a federal agency giving you both the money and the directions on how to spend it.
Katrina Christiansen.
I think with this question, one of the things that we have to do is kind of remove those prejudices we might have when the topic of homelessness comes up. And instead, as an engineer, I would focus on the data. And the data says that the thing that works is actually closing the income gap to the rental prices. So when you're able to help people who aren't making enough to afford housing, that solves some of the homelessness problem. The other thing that you need to do is make sure that those people have access to the resources to support them to continue to stay in that. And the third thing that we need to do is address the venture capitalists and the individuals who are colluding in the rental market to raise prices. The DOJ just issued a lawsuit against a software company that was allowing renters to collude and raise prices. When I was in Fargo earlier this year, I talked to a woman. She was on a fixed income, she'd retired, and her rent went up $500 a month. That is completely unacceptable. So I think Senator Cramer, when he talks about the problems with the federal government, I'm not sure he realizes he's a senator and he sets those rules. And so we need to deal with the antitrust, we need to deal with the collusion, and we need to look at the data and propose solutions and fund them. That's the power of the federal government. And address that.
$35 trillion debt.
Closing statements.
Yeah.
You can do it here. We are out of time, so
Sure.
closing statements start. Senator Cramer, you have your 1 minute close. Go ahead.
Thank you again, Matt and Dave and AARP and Prairie Public. Katrina Christiansen, thank you for this opportunity. Look, I'm asking for re-election. I've been a senator for one term. The United States Senate is a place that respects and actually honors a second term. That seniority that you get with a gavel, and I'd have two of them if Republicans regain the majority, particularly in the national defense arena, as well as the infrastructure, environment, public works arena. Two very important areas for North Dakota. And with that comes more opportunity to persuade, more opportunity to introduce, more opportunity to set the agenda. And you know me, I've been with you for a long time. I've always had your back. You've always had mine as voters and citizens of this great state. I love my Lord. I love my state. I love my family. I have 6 grandchildren that live here in North Dakota. All of my kids live here in North Dakota. I plan to live in North Dakota the rest of my life, spend occasional weeks in Washington, D.C. when the duty calls. But for me, it's always all about North Dakota.
Closing statement, Katrina Christiansen.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Senator Cramer. Most importantly, I want to thank Max, my husband, my 3 kids, Henry, Vivian, and Hans. You have been so incredible and supportive of me running and campaigning for a whole year. You are my whole world, and I love you so much. So I've had the opportunity to go to all 53 counties in North Dakota, and I've talked to independents, and I've talked to Republicans, and I've talked to Democrats. And I've concluded that when President Kennedy said, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet, that we all breathe the same air, that we all cherish our children's future, and that we're all mortal. This is so true. And this is why we can't let our differences divide us. My opponent works to stoke divisions, but you can send someone to DC who's going to fight for you and your family and your community. And that's who I'll serve in DC, not a party. It's time to send Kevin home.
Thank you both for appearing in this important debate. I want to thank my guests again, Senator Kevin Cramer and Katrina Christiansen. A reminder, Election Day is November 5th. Early voting starts soon, so please do that. My thanks again to AARP North Dakota and Prairie Public for tuning in to this wonderful debate. I'm Matt O'Lean. Good night.
Tonight, our Campaign 2024 debate coverage includes the race in Maine's 2nd Congressional District. The candidates are 3-term Democratic incumbent Jared Golden and Republican State Representative Austin Terrio. The Cook Political Report with Amy Walter has this race as a toss-up heading into the November election. You can watch the debate live starting at 7 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN. C-SPAN Now, our free mobile video app, or online at cspan.org.
Friday nights, watch C-SPAN's 2024 Campaign Trail, a weekly discussion on how the presidential, Senate, and House campaigns have progressed in the past week. 2 reporters join each week to talk about the issues, messages, and events driving the week's political news, and to take a look at the week ahead. Watch C-SPAN's 2024 Campaign Trail, Friday nights at 7 Eastern on C-SPAN, online at cspan.org, or download as a podcast on C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app, or wherever you get your podcasts. C-SPAN, your unfiltered view of politics.
The 2024 Democratic vice presidential nominee, Governor Tim Walz, hosted a campaign rally in York, Pennsylvania, where he began by acknowledging the impact of Hurricane Helene in the South. He also talked about his debate with Senator J.D. Vance, Social Security, reproductive rights, and protecting children from gun violence. This is 30 Minutes.
Wow! Well, hello, York. Before I start, I just have to admit, that is the coolest thing I've ever got to do, is come off that bus. That was really great. Jerry Ann, thank you. Thank you for coming over to stand with folks who care about the democracy and understanding we can work together for the good of this country. So thank you. And anytime I can be around your Senator John Fetterman, it's a good day. So, look, he's doing an incredible job, but I always say this back in Minnesota. He is the only guy in America that can dress down better than me. So I appreciate that. I follow his lead. Look, we got some work to do, but I've also had the privilege when I was in Congress to serve with one of the most honorable, effective senators. You got to send Bob Casey back to the Senate. So, you got to. And I'll tell you, when I don't watch a lot of the pundits or whatever, but I will tell you the one who speaks the truth. And every time I hear her when she's on, I'm like, whoever she's representing is damn lucky. Madeline Dean is doing a hell of a job. So she's amazing. And then A.G. Henry is here, and we were just discussing, as a governor, having an A.G. that has your back matters more than anything. So really appreciate that. And to Pennsylvanians, of course, it's who you are, and to the EMTs, thank you for the incident we had, for taking care of folks. My wife is always reminding me to stay hydrated too, so it sounds like folks are okay. But look, I do want to start out on that note, saying for all of us, our hearts, thoughts, and prayers are going out to our neighbors, the folks across the southeast United States. They're still in the midst of a catastrophe from the damage of Hurricane Helene. Families lost homes, and too many loved ones have lost their lives. I know President Biden, Vice President Harris, my fellow governors and state and local officials of the impacted states working round the clock to help and protect their people. Vice President Harris was going to be here today. She's on the ground right now in Georgia, making sure folks are doing what they can do. You've all seen it. These are challenging times for us. They are challenging. But I've always said this, they bring out the very best in who we are as Americans. So, as a governor, a former guardsman, I've been activated in the wake of tornadoes, floods, and I understand at this point what things are happening. It's an opportunity to put partisanship aside, commit to providing the resources necessary, make sure these people get their lives and their livelihood back in order. So, I also say it for the folks, and we see, so the news gets out there. For anyone affected this, keep following local law enforcement. Let the first responders and professionals handle this. We can bring the goodness of the American people in, is what we're seeing. So thank you all. Go to the Red Cross, do some of those things, but we will rebuild. We will get things back. That's just what we do as Americans. So thank you. So I know it was a beautiful Tuesday night. Anybody watch the debate last night? Look, not bad for a football coach. Not bad. So you also saw something interesting. We had a civil but spirited debate. And I did not underestimate Senator Vance as a slick talker. He could. But I also called out there, you can't rewrite history. You can't rewrite history. And trying to mislead us about Donald Trump's record, that's gaslighting. That's gaslighting. So on the economy, reproductive freedom, housing, gun violence, look, they tried to tell us last night, wow, you should be happy. Donald Trump tried to save Obamacare. Are you kidding me? He spent his entire presidency trying to eliminate it. But I'll tell you, I think some of you saw this. When you're governor, congressman, you're trying to solve problems, whatever you want a straight answer on something. The moment that really stuck out is I just asked the simplest of all questions that every single American should be able to answer. I asked him if Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. He refused to answer. We have an EMT, we need someone with water right here, center back, right in front of the media. You have somebody? There we go. There he is. You guys got water? Yeah, you're right. We probably should. That's a good point. Think about it. We got somebody on it? All right, thank you all. But look, I think you can feel the difference because what I was doing last night and the way I understand the job I'm asking the American people to entrust me with and to entrust Kamala Harris with, I was speaking to the American people last night. It felt, especially in that moment to me, that Senator Vance was speaking to an audience of one. Now look, there is a reason Mike Pence was not on that stage with me. And let me just say this. I served with Mike Pence in Congress. We disagreed on most issues. But in Congress and as a vice president, I never criticized Mike Pence's ethics and commitment to this country. And he made the decision for the Constitution. Mike Pence did his duty. He honored his oath, and he chose the Constitution over Donald Trump. Understand, in that 88th minute last night, with that damning non-answer, Senator Vance made it clear he will always make a different choice than Mike Pence made. And as I said then, and I will say now, that should be absolutely disqualifying if you're asking to be the Vice President of the United States. But our democracy is strong, and we know that campaigns are supposed to be about giving a vision. And last night you saw two very different visions for the future of this country. You also, a couple weeks ago, saw two very different visions of leadership on the debate stage with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Presidents' words mean something. Presidents' words have consequences. When this nation is in some of the most difficult times, we turn and look for that leadership. In the heart of the Great Depression, at that first inaugural, Franklin Delano Roosevelt looked at Americans who were suffering and to reassure them and bring us together said, all we have to fear is fear itself. And it is a quote that echoes through history because it went to who we are. And what he was talking about was rallying together. When communism was on a spread, when the Russian Empire was spreading, Ronald Reagan stood there and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. And as Donald Trump and Kamala Harris sat on that stage, articulating a vision and showing what type of leadership they had, FDR made his quote, Gorbachev made his quote, Donald Trump yelled, they're eating dogs, they're eating cats. you. I'm with you. If this wasn't so damn serious, it would be funny. But character matters. Character matters. And Kamala Harris has it. Her vision is about bringing us together and being a president for all Americans. Now, being in this beautiful town, riding in on a bus, again, super cool. I do always recognize this. The privilege of being on this ticket is the privilege of my lifetime. But the real privilege is getting to meet Americans where they live all across this country. And coming back here to Pennsylvania, I have found out Pennsylvania and Minnesota have a lot in common. Super Bowl rings are not one of them. We're 4-0, people. Let me have my moment. Let me have my moment. Go Vikings. But look, it's deeper than that. History. We have fed this nation and we have powered this nation from our two states. And we also share something else that bonds us all together. And it's the reason all of you are here. Thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy life. Thank you to the mom and daughter I'm going to talk to who are here first thing in the morning to come and stand in here to say that this was what it's about. But you're here, you could be anywhere. You could be doing something else. You came here for that simple reason. You love this country. So thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It feels good when we know we're united. That's what this is about. Kamala Harris knows that. From her first day as a prosecutor to right now as vice president, Kamala Harris has only one client: the people. The people. She did her job to protect us. She took on the predators. She took on fraudsters trying to rip people out of their houses. And she took on transnational gangs and corporate interest. And the story that needs to be told, and you see it, she did it by reaching across the aisle to find solutions. That matters. It matters. Donald Trump says, I don't like people who don't like me. I got off a bus last time, I believe it was here in Pennsylvania, one of the first times off that bus, and there were supporters just like you. On the other side, there were supporters that weren't. And I said, I can always tell they had on red hats and they weren't supporters. But Kamala Harris turned to me and looked me in the eye. She said, Tim, never forget, we work just as hard and our policies matter for those people and those people. We're in it together. We're in it together. And let's just be really honest about this, especially for the young folks who are here, because it seems like maybe people had forgotten this. Our politics, and Kamala Harris reminded us, can be done with a sense of joy. It can be done with a sense of happiness. Look, I am proud to be the running mate with this incredible leader. For some of you might have heard it, I grew up in rural Nebraska around family farms, and I know Pennsylvanians do this too. When you're from a small town, there's a game we play. We try and out small town somebody else. So I tell them 400. They're like, yeah, it's about the same. And then I say, I had 24 kids in my class. But it seemed like about 12 of them were cousins. So that's a little different. But I said what you learn in those towns, and this is what I don't think Donald Trump understands. You learn about the idea of taking care of one another. You understand that? You learn how to help each other. And I was looking around here on this. In my case, I learned how to tune up a 1979 International Harvester. So there you got that. So I'm glad it wasn't green over there. I'd have felt bad saying this. But look, you know your responsibility is to the common good. It's not about driving, and Kamala Harris says this often too. Leadership is not about who you can push down. It's who you can lift up. It's that simple. So I'll tell you, my neighbors, they saw me. They sent me to Congress, a pretty red district. I think they told me we had one other Democrat since like 1892 in that district. But my constituents sent me there. So my job was to find a solution for them. worked across the aisle to pass farm bills together to make a difference in people's lives, worked and became the ranking member on Veterans Affairs, and we expanded veterans benefits. We made sure crop insurance, farm education, beginning farm and rancher, job training. Those are things that people are concerned about. That's the things people are sitting in your communities talking about. They're not sitting around talking about banning books. They're asking how to make childcare affordable. And they want an answer that's not just a bunch of things. They want answers. Those are the values that have animated the public service of myself and, of course, of Vice President Harris, too. And here's the thing. I think that's what you're here for. Those are the values we're taking to the White House. Those are the values. You already know that here in Pennsylvania. You felt the pain of the Trump years. Killed 275,000 jobs. Now we're hearing last night that he created all these jobs. You're like, where the hell are those jobs? I never saw them. Well, under Vice President Harris, Pennsylvania's created more than 500,000 jobs during this time. Look, Kamala grew up in that same middle-class family. She knows the economy works best when it's fair. Look, you folks out here know this, and I was trying to make the point last night. We talk about stopping price gouging, and they want to talk, oh, that's some type of communism or whatever. No, here's what I'm trying to understand is, our farmers are making about $4.30 a bushel of corn, but prices went up at the grocery stores, even though when they were getting more than that for corn, prices were lower. Somebody's taking a cut out of that. Somebody's making money out of that. So and Donald Trump says, instead of fixing that, the folks who are taking the money should just get a bigger tax cut. Well, that's not fair. I brought it up last night. I don't understand how our Republican neighbors wouldn't be really mad about this. How all of you pay your taxes, you know what they do. They pay for the firefighters, they pay for the police, they pay for the roads, they pay for the schools. That's what it does. And they should be fair. They should be fair. How is it that he doesn't have to pay taxes 10 out of 15 years? That doesn't make sense. But you know what happens here is, we're talking about these prices and we're doing things. I saw a photo op of Donald Trump a few weeks ago, and he was in a grocery store. And he pulled out money to pay for a woman's grocery store. Look how generous he was on this. I would bet you any amount of money that's the first time he's been in a grocery store since 1985. I guarantee you that. He never went into that grocery store. He doesn't actually know what the cost of those things are. But as the rest of the world saw, because of his botched handling of COVID and a global recession, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris had to work ourselves out of that hole. So let's remember, it was Donald Trump that started a trade war with China that his own people said he lost. Slashed income, put farmers into bankruptcy, and killed thousands of jobs because he thought it was a great idea. Then look, I was part of authoring, I was on the committee when we wrote farm bills. These things are bipartisan. There's a very important piece of that, crop insurance, making sure that our farmers don't go out. He tried to cut those programs. And then he tried to cut grants to rural communities affected by natural disasters. Just like the stuff we're seeing in the Southeast. That's not how you handle your neighbors. That's not how you do things right. Trying to cut protections for small farmers against big corporations, that's unfair. And here's the thing. When it comes to farmers and ranchers and how they did under his leadership, his ag secretary said something, and I come from farm country, that is just stunning. And some of you in here, if you're associated with this, you know people, you know agriculture. These guys said, well, the trick is you get bigger or you get out. That's how you destroy family farms. That's how you get consolidation in agriculture, and that's how you end up making it easier that prices get fixed in the end. Diversification is better. Small towns know that. Look, I know this. We know where the votes are. We need to take our values and talk about those in areas that we know. We're not just looking for your vote. We believe the policies are going to improve your lives. We believe these things will help you. Kamala's laid out a plan, and she talks about an opportunity economy, one that reaches into farming and energy communities, just like this area of Pennsylvania where York's at, things that make a difference. You're hoping to buy a home someday? Let's make it easier by getting some down payment affordability and build those 3 million new homes. That child tax credit that can reduce childhood poverty by a third, lets you buy a crib or the car seat or the baby clothes. That's what you get. If you're really talking about you're concerned about the children, put your money where your mouth is and help out on that. And again, if you're getting squeezed on grocery, prescription drugs, let's take on the price gougers in Big Pharma. Let me just, those of you in here know this. I just met someone talking, those who need insulin. This is not a choice. It's like, oh, maybe I'd like to buy a new TV or maybe I'd like. No, you die if you don't get insulin. It's a necessity. And Kamala Harris capping insulin at $35 gives people a mind that they can get it, peace of mind. We did it in Minnesota, and you know what it took to get it done? It took a mother who lost her son because he was rationing his insulin once he went off her insurance. And when we're talking about price gouging, again, I'll say that little vial of insulin that's $35, it used to cost, in some cases, up to $800. You know how much it costs to make it? $5. $5 is what they say. So look, let's start doing the things that people are asking for, not the stupid things that are there to distract us. If you've got an idea for a small business, let's cut the red tape. We're willing to help on that. And then give a tax credit. And when we talk about the tax credit, it's been frozen forever at $5,000. Who can start a small business on $5,000 on a tax credit? Kamala Harris proposed 10 times more at $50,000 tax credit. And when people ask a couple things, how will you pay for that? First of all, those small businesses will generate a lot of revenue and a lot of extra jobs. And secondly, if you call yourself a billionaire like Donald Trump and you've not paid federal tax for 10 of the last 15 years, we'll start collecting from folks like that. Now make a difference. So, and in rural communities, start connecting through rural lenders so that we're keeping the money in communities for investments in those jobs in rural communities. If you live in the heartland and you want to start that small business, there's a program called Rural Partners Network that starts to make sure and expand that nationwide, that makes sure these communities can thrive. And I keep talking about this. People are concerned. Small communities. My small community, when I lived there, was bigger, and it continues to drop down. Well, you have speculators. You heard last night that it's immigrants. They're taking all the housing. How are they getting a loan when we can't in some cases? But the question is, you don't ever question the speculators that buy them? That's what Kamala Harris is talking about, making it free. Making sure that freedom is there and making sure that it's fair. This idea that you can have an economy that works for everyone makes a difference. Now look, I want to be clear. We've got Republicans in the group here. And we've got them in our families. We got them in our families. Look, the Republican Party has added much to this country. We need them back again. Because that Republican Party used to talk about freedom and fair economy, and they meant it. Turns out Donald Trump's people and their definition of freedom is freedom to invade your doctor's office. Freedom to invade your bedroom. They're super concerned about all of our bedrooms. That's not normal. That is not normal. And again, I said this. Well, and again, it said, look, I don't like, as a teacher, I said this, that you should quit, calling people weird. I said, then quit doing weird things, and that's how that works. But with that being said, we're just simply asking this, and I said it. This is where the Republicans in the group, this is core to the Republican Party. The idea of making sure that government was there to provide the services that it should, build the roads, do the schools, provide public safety. A lot of old school Republicans just concerned it got into other things. That's a fair discussion. But the one core of that Republican Party was, and I say this often, I might not make the same choices you make in your life. I might not see it the same way. That's fine to have that difference. But the thing is, we respect those personal differences. Those are yours to make. Those are not me to make. You certainly don't want Donald Trump making them. So I started with the have a lot in common. I will guarantee you this isn't just a Minnesota phrase. Mind your own damn business. We'll get along better. Get along better. you heard a very clear difference on women's reproductive rights last night. And this is not theoretical. When I talk about names in there, these are women that didn't want to have their names in public. They wanted to have their own personal health decisions be private, as they should be. But because of what they've done, they pushed them into it because they can't get the care. And if you think they're stopping with just 20 state abortion bans, I talk about this, fertility treatments. And the reason I talk about it's personal. You've all done it. This thing, the families who know this, and again, a lot of these things you don't want to talk about because they are personal, but the hell of going through that, look, you're there, however you want to have your family, you decide you want to have children, and you can't, you want to be able to use the science that's there to be able to make that happen. So if you personally haven't gone through it, I guarantee you have somebody who has. And what I said last night was, if you don't know Amanda Zarowski, if you don't know a Hadley Duvall, the names I've talked about, these women who went through this, if Donald Trump's reelected, it's only a matter of time and all of us will know somebody like that. That's the issue. So for Gwen and I, it took us years to have a child, but we had access to health care. We had access to fertility treatments. And because of that, some of you heard me say this, when we had our daughter, we named her Hope, because it's a powerful word. Her and Gus, her and her brother Gus are our whole world. We talk about them often. But that's what, yeah. So, and that's what this election is about, too. But my wife, who's a very practical Midwest Lutheran English teacher, she often says, hope's the most powerful word in the universe, but it's not a plan. Folks, we got to have a plan to make sure that we win this thing. We got to have a plan to make sure we get it done. Because when Vice President Harris talks about freedom, she means your freedom to make your personal health decisions, choice about your families. And this is my appeal to Republicans. When did the Republican Party think it was okay for politicians to make personal choices about your life? That's not okay. And the freedom of our seniors to retire with dignity by strengthening Social Security. We didn't get to talk about it last night. I didn't get to talk about it much last night. But this is how they think about things. Donald Trump called Social Security a Ponzi scheme. And Senator Vance said it was the biggest roadblock to fiscal sanity. Look, if you've got $1 billion and you're not paying your taxes, I don't think you give a damn if the Social Security check comes or not. But if you're like my nearly 90-year-old mom, she depends on that check. It's really important. And we paid into that system. It doesn't add to the national debt. And we talked about it last night, and I will not apologize for being passionate about this, and I'm going to continue to talk about it. Freedom to send our kids to school without worrying they're going to be shot dead. That's it. I'm a gun owner. I'm a veteran. I'm a gun owner. I'm a hunter. And I found out in the first debate, Kamala's a hunter or a gun owner. She talked about being a gun owner. But look, we keep talking about this. This isn't about the Second Amendment. We can protect the Second Amendment. But our first responsibility is to our kids. First responsibility to kids. And the teachers. Yeah, as we said, after some of these mass shootings, Donald Trump and people said that Americans were traumatized, said we need to get over it. Senator Vance said it's a fact of life down in Georgia. 2 dead students, 2 teachers trying to protect their students dead, and told us that just a fact of life. Kamala Harris said it doesn't have to be. It does not have to be a fact of life. So look, you know it. This is my line. My Lutheran choir wife would tell me this. I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know you know this. The choir needs to sing. We cannot afford 4 years of Donald Trump. We cannot afford 4 years of Donald Trump. We're not going back. So last night, if you were watching that debate, just so you know, you have to agree on the rules, like 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 1 minute. Honest to goodness, and you heard it, Senator Vance clarified that. He said, when we agreed to this debate, we agreed there'd be no fact checking. He said it. He said it. We did agree to that. And, you know, they say that's meant to be. I would have spent my whole night saying, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. But here's the thing. They helped us out with this. Because no matter what he said, we know what the playbook is. It's a little over 900 pages, and it's called Project 2025. They say, we don't know what that is. Well, really, Senator, you wrote the foreword to the architect, you know, the book. That might have something to do with it, but here's what I said. I know the surest thing. They printed this thing. They put it out there. It lists exactly what they're going to do, from pregnancy registers to gutting, Head Start, some of those things. But I said this, as the old football coach in me knows, if you're willing to make a playbook, you're going to run the plays. You're going to use the plays. But here's the deal. This is the power of the democracy. I think it's important to know what's out there, but that stuff doesn't inspire people. What inspires people is what we're going to do. And in this election, we have a chance to turn the page on those guys. Elect a new generation of leadership and chart the new way forward. All right, you know it. 34 days to go. Some counties, mail ballots have already been dropped. And don't forget here, October 21st, last day to register in Pennsylvania. Here's my pro tip to legislators in Pennsylvania. Do what we do in Minnesota. Get it to same-day registration. It shouldn't be hard to vote. Shouldn't be hard to vote. So here it is. This is our time. All gas, no brakes. And look at me. I'm trying to lead by example. We will sleep when we're dead because I'm not sleeping. So we don't do it because we're partisan. We don't do it because we're Democrats. We do it because we love our country and believe in the promise of America. So you know it. As the next president of the United States says, when we fight, when we fight, when we fight, here we go.
Later today, Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump campaigns in Saginaw, Michigan. The Cook Political Report with Amy Walter rates Michigan as a toss-up state. Its 15 electoral votes are in play for either party's candidate. Watch the event live at 3 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN. C-SPAN Now, our free mobile video app, or online at cspan.org.
C-SPAN Now is a free mobile app featuring your unfiltered view of what's happening in Washington, live and on demand. Keep up with the day's biggest events with live streams of floor proceedings and hearings from the U.S. Congress, White House events, the courts, campaigns, and more from the world of politics, all at your fingertips. You can also stay current with the latest episodes of Washington Journal and find scheduling information for C-SPAN's TV networks and C-SPAN Radio, plus a variety of compelling podcasts. C-SPAN Now is available at the Apple Store and Google Play. Scan the QR code to download it for free today, or visit our website, cspan.org/cspan now. C-SPAN Now, your front row seat to Washington, anytime, anywhere. If you ever miss any of C-SPAN's coverage, you can find it anytime online at cspan.org. Videos of key hearings, debates, and other events feature markers that guide you to interesting and newsworthy highlights. These points of interest markers appear on the right-hand side of your screen when you hit play on select videos. This timeline tool makes it easy to quickly get an idea of what was debated and decided in Washington. Scroll through and spend a few minutes on C-SPAN's points of interest.
At a rally in Auburn Hills, Michigan, 2024 Republican vice presidential nominee Senator J.D. Vance commented on the recent debate with his Democratic rival, Governor Tim Walz. This was the senator's first campaign appearance following the debate. Other topics included the U.S. port workers' strike and immigration's impact on the housing industry. This is 45 minutes.
Why don't we liberate these United States? We're the ones who need it first. Let the rest of the world help us forge change, and let's rebuild America first. Hello, Michigan. Well, it is great to be in the great state of Michigan once again. It is great to be at an incredible manufacturing firm, Visioneering, and it is great to be in the state that I think is going to be pivotal to giving us 270 electoral votes and making Donald Trump the next president of the United States. Now, it's hard to believe, but we've only got 33 days until the election. Now, that's a good news, bad news situation, because that means we've got a very limited amount of time to make our case to the American people that Donald Trump ought to be reelected president. But the good news is that means only 33 more days for Kamala Harris to gaslight and lie to the American people, and that's a pretty good thing. Now, we of course had a debate last night, a vice presidential debate. I thought it went pretty well. Now, it's funny because, we did this debate, and then I talked to the president afterwards, and we talked a little bit about, what actually happened, and, some of the points that I made, some of the points that Governor Walz made, and, he made this observation. He said that Tim Walz said that he was friends with school shooters twice. And that's something I actually didn't notice, that Tim Walz had said that on the debate stage. And I said, did he really say that, sir? And he said, I'm telling you, man, go and watch the clips. He said he was friends with school shooters twice. And I said that was probably only the third or fourth dumbest comment Tim Walz made that night then. Because look, I got to be honest, I feel a little bad for Governor Walz. And the reason I feel bad for him is because he has to defend the indefensible. And that is the record of Kamala Harris. And think about this. For the past 8 weeks, Kamala Harris, who never won a Democrat primary vote, has gone around the country saying that she is on day one going to tackle the affordability crisis that's making it hard for you to afford groceries, housing, and everything else. She says on day one, we're going to make energy prices lower for American consumers. And on day one, she says, we're going to tackle the instability and conflict all over the world. Well, Kamala Harris, day one was 1,400 days ago. What the hell have you been doing that whole time? Why don't you get to work? Instead of just talking about what you're going to do, why don't you actually do it? Here's the thing. I'm running to be your next Vice President of the United States, and I'm incredibly honored to stand here and ask you for your vote and ask you for your hard work. But if we win, and I believe that we are going to win in 33 days, my friends, I feel very confident about it. But when we win, the American people will have given me an awesome responsibility to represent them on the world stage, to advocate for Donald Trump's policies, to work with Congress to get things done for the American people. You know, I get sick of having a Vice President of the United States for 3.5 years pretend that she bears no responsibility for all of the policies that have made this country weaker, less prosperous, and less secure. And part of our responsibility, part of our job, my friends, over the next 33 days is to remind Michiganders and everybody else that yes, Kamala Harris is at fault for the Inflation Explosion Act. Yes, Kamala Harris is at fault for the explosion in federal spending that drove inflation through the roof. Yes, Kamala Harris is responsible, as the border czar, for the wide open border. Kamala Harris has been in power. She caused the problems. We're not going to entrust her to solve the very problems that she created. We're going to entrust Donald Trump with the presidency of the United States. Now let's talk a little bit about manufacturing, because I know we've got a lot of employees and a lot of family members who work with Visioneering, a great American aerospace company. We believe, Donald Trump and I believe, that one of the biggest mistakes our leaders made is that they decided over 40 years that we didn't need to make our own stuff anymore. And this company stands as a proud and stark contrast to that, because right here in Visioneering, you've got 350 American workers that are making great American products. We're proud of you. We're going to fight for you, and we're going to build on that great track record. You know, my papaw was a union steel worker for almost 40 years. And the steel mill that employed my papaw had almost 10,000 jobs at one point. Now it's got about 2,000 jobs. And the steel mill, we're one of the lucky ones. Because a lot of those great American steel producers, they didn't just shed 8,000 jobs. They went out of business altogether. And why did they do it? They did it because other countries used literal slave labor to undercut the wages of American workers and destroy our industries. And Donald Trump, if we stand for anything, we stand for an end to that practice. We're going to build more in America. We're going to manufacture more in America. We're going to make more in America, and we're going to do it with American workers and build American prosperity in the process. That is our promise. That is Donald Trump's solemn promise. Now, here's the thing. Of course, Visioneering is a great aerospace company. We got a lot of other proud industries in the state of Michigan, and a lot of proud industries that are not thriving thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. Now, where did we go in this country where you've got Kamala Harris who wants to tax working people so that rich people, she wants to subsidize rich people to buy electric vehicles made in China? Is that a good idea? Absolutely. It's not a good idea. Now, here's the thing. My papaw, like I said, was a union steel worker, and he was a little gruff from time to time. I love my papaw. But you know what? He had a word for the kind of policies that Kamala Harris is pursuing, where we're going to tax American workers and then send their jobs overseas. One word, and that was bullshit. Doesn't make an ounce of sense. And it's not just American workers and Michigan workers in particular. I mean, look, we've got the proudest auto industry in the entire world built right here in the state of Michigan. As a Buckeye, it's hard for me to admit that, my friends. It is hard for me to admit how good Michigan workers are at making automobiles. But why are we trying to tell Americans that they've got to drive electric vehicles made in China? Why don't we send this message? This is America. Drive whatever the hell you want to, because we believe in freedom and we believe in choice in the United States of America. And look, if we pursue those policies and say, yeah, if you want to drive an electric vehicle, by all means, drive an electric vehicle. But if you want to drive a Michigan-built, gas-powered car, that is your right, and we're going to support your choice to do whatever you want to do, and we're going to build prosperity for Michigan workers in the process. But thanks to Kamala Harris's policies, this is a person who loves to pretend that she stands for American workers. Well, nobody stood as strongly and as proudly for American workers than Donald J. Trump. He did it for 4 years, and he's going to do it again. So just in the last few years under Kamala Harris's leadership, I'm going to read this to make sure I get my facts right. Stellantis announced that it was going to lay off 2,500 Michigan auto workers who make the Ram 1500 Classic. What a disgrace that is. A great American automobile, and those jobs are going to get destroyed and either replaced with factory jobs in Mexico or completely eliminated altogether because Kamala Harris doesn't want to empower Americans to buy Michigan-made automobiles. Last year, GM let go 1,300 Michigan workers at 2 separate facilities. And Ford is currently rolling back a lot of its EV production because a lot of Americans don't want to buy EVs. They want to buy the cars that they want to buy. Now, why are we doing this to our own workers? Why are we doing this to our own industry? Why are we doing this to our own country? Because Kamala Harris has decided that she's going to pursue policies that make her donors, her green scam donors, rich, and she's going to impoverish a generation of Michigan auto workers. I say, hell no. Let's empower and enrich Michigan auto workers with the leadership of Donald Trump. Now, look, this is not just about, 2,500 jobs, my friends. That's not just a number. Think about that. That is 2,500 American families that have a family supporting wage, and that disappears thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. That's 2,500 moms and dads. They're going to have financial stress they didn't have before because of Kamala Harris's policies. That's 2,500 families. They're going to be worried about putting food on the table or paying heating bills because we all know it gets pretty cold up here in the middle of a Michigan winter. That is 2,500 families made to suffer not because of an act of God, not because of something that happened accidentally, but because our own leadership failed to do its job. And if this election is about anything, it is about getting back to some common sense economic principles that put American citizens, American workers, and American consumers first. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Every single day, that's why we exist. It's to serve you, not to destroy your jobs like Kamala Harris. Now, of course, remember, the promise that was made, and Tim Walz made this argument last night. And one of these things that really, really annoyed the hell out of me is he said, well, look, here's this economist who says that Donald Trump's plans are going to lead to higher inflation. Well, first of all, Tim, Donald Trump was already president for 4 years. We got rising take-home pay and lower inflation, so I don't think those economists know what the hell they're talking about. But even if you ignore the evidence of what Donald Trump did in office, look, what these economists are saying is that if we ship our entire industrial base off to countries like China, it's going to make American workers richer somehow. It's going to make our goods cheaper somehow. Well, we've been living through the inflation of the last 3.5 years, and we know that when we make our country less self-reliant, when we pursue the policies that Kamala Harris says that we ought to pursue, it makes Americans poorer. It drives up the cost of food and of housing. It makes our country less prosperous, and it makes our nation more dependent on people who don't like us to make the critical stuff that we need. We got to get rid of that. Stop listening to the economists and start listening to common sense in this country. But think about this. They said, here's the deal. Tim Walz has the audacity, and Kamala Harris has the audacity to say that, well, if Donald Trump's policies are enacted, that's going to lead to higher prices for American consumers. Tim, we already ran this experiment once. Donald Trump's economic policies worked for American families. They worked for American consumers. But here's the thing. Think about this. If a Chinese company wants to hire a literal slave laborer making $4 a day, and they want to import the goods made by that slave laborer, then it's going to make Americans poor. Because, of course, we shouldn't expect American middle-class workers to work for a slave wage in China. We ought to expect our middle-class workers to be able to support a family on those wages, and that's what we're going to fight for every single day. So here's what you got to do. To prevent those companies and those countries from undercutting the wages of American workers, you got to be willing to impose tariffs. Fight back against the theft of the American middle class. Penalize those companies that are shipping jobs overseas and give a tax cut to American workers. That's how you build prosperity for this country, and that's what we're going to fight for. And let's just recap what Kamala Harris's policies have actually done. The average Michigan family is spending over $1,000 per month to pay for what they could have bought 3.5 years ago. That's $12,000 a year, a hidden tax of $12,000 a year just to be able to buy what you could have bought 3.5 years ago. That's not pro-working people. Kamala Harris has presided over policies that have seen the cost of housing go up by over 50%. That is not pro-working families. She's seen policies that have seen the cost of eggs go up by more than double. Gallon of milk is now about $4 in the state of Michigan. Groceries are up 25%. Kamala Harris's leadership has been tried and it has been found wanting, and Americans, we want to get back to common sense. We want to be able to afford a nice living, a nice house for our families, and to do that, we have got to elect the common sense leadership of Donald J. Trump, and that's exactly what everybody in this room is going to do. Now I want to talk about just something else that, credit card delinquencies are about 9% right now. That means a lot of American families are sacrificing. They're not paying their credit card debts so they can afford groceries or they can afford the mortgage. What a disgrace and what a sad commentary it is on Kamala Harris's economic policies that you've got hardworking people who are doing everything that they can to provide for their families, and they're falling further behind. Not because they're not doing their job, but because Kamala Harris isn't doing hers. So ma'am, you're right. Kamala Harris doesn't care about this because she doesn't understand, because she doesn't talk to anybody. She's afraid of interviews. So she doesn't talk to people, and she doesn't realize that her economic policies are making it harder on American families. And you all know my story. I talked about it a little bit last night. But I was raised by a grandmother who sometimes would refuse to turn on the heating at night when times got especially tough. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes forego paying for her own medicines so that she could put food on the table in our family. And I remember feeling, even though money was tight, that thanks to my grandmother, I never really lacked for anything. But American grandparents and American parents shouldn't have to make those sacrifices to begin with. If you work hard and play by the rules, you ought to be able to afford a good life for your family. And that's what Donald Trump and I are going to fight for every single day for the next 4 years. And I want to talk about one more issue. We're going to, of course, take a few questions from the reporters, but I want to talk about one more issue. Because the American media, and especially Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, they don't want to talk about how this illegal immigration crisis is a theft of the American dream from American citizens. And we see this in small communities. We see this in big cities all over our country. When you let in 25 million people, you know what that does? That stresses municipal budgets. So a lot of cities and towns can't afford to provide for their own citizens because they're focused on providing for people who shouldn't be here. Hospital wait times, because illegal aliens use hospital emergency rooms primarily. So hospital wait times have gone up in the state of Michigan. They're close to 3 hours for American citizens who want to go into the hospital and see a doctor. We've got so many problems. Housing. When you let in 25 million illegal aliens and they compete with Americans for scarce homes, that drives up the cost of housing, and that is a major cost of the housing crisis. I had the debate moderator attempt to fact check me last night. She said, what's your evidence that illegal immigration promotes and increases housing cost increase? And I said, well, first of all, common sense. When you let in millions of people who shouldn't be here, you got to house them somewhere, and those are houses that ought by right go to American citizens. Donald Trump and I are going to fight for that every single day. American homes for American people. But there's also, to talk about Tim Walz's economist that he loves to cite, our own Federal Reserve has commissioned a study that shows that when you let in a lot of illegal aliens, it jacks up the price of housing. So how about this simple principle? Kamala Harris wants to give amnesty to millions of illegal aliens. She wants to bankrupt Medicare by giving Medicare to illegal aliens. Do we want that? She wants to bankrupt Social Security by giving Social Security to illegal aliens. Do we want that? Here's the Donald Trump plan, and here's the Donald Trump message to illegal aliens in this country. In 6 months, pack your bags because you're going home. That's what we're going to do. And you know, you heard this a little bit last night. You hear a lot of talk about compassion when the issue of illegal immigration comes up. Well, let's talk about compassion. Because I'm the father of 3 beautiful young kids. I don't think that it's compassionate to empower the Mexican drug cartels to engage in sex trafficking along our southern border. That's not compassionate. I don't believe that it's compassionate to flood American cities and towns with fentanyl that is killing our citizens by the tens of thousands. I don't believe that it is compassionate to allow our southern border to become a drug trafficking and business zone for some of the most evil and terrible people in the world. You know what's compassionate? Closing that border down and putting the interests of American citizens first, and that is what we're going to do. You know, because these guys, they love to talk about threats to democracy. Well, as Donald Trump will often remind you, he took a bullet for democracy, so I don't think that any person can accuse the guy of doing anything other than fighting every single day to make this country more prosperous and to make the world more peaceful. But when the media talks about threats to democracy, you know what a threat to democracy is? When you have Kamala Harris running for president despite not earning a single vote from Democratic primary voters, that's a threat to democracy. You know what else is a threat to democracy? When big tech firms and major American companies and big government censors American citizens and deprives them of their voice in the town square. That's a way bigger threat to democracy than anything else going on, and we're going to stop it right away. Because look, I genuinely think this is one very big difference between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Look, I disagree, of course, with Kamala Harris. I disagree with Governor Walz. I disagree with a lot of the folks who support him, but I would die fighting to defend their right to speak their mind, even if I disagree with it. And I think every single person in this room believes that because we believe in free speech. And as a person who was raised by a couple of working class blue collar Democrats, I want to say to every Democrat who's watching at home, every Democrat who's in this room, you are more than welcome in Donald Trump's Republican Party. We're the party of common sense. We got a big tent, and you're welcome in our movement. Because whether you agree or disagree with us about tax policy or regulatory policy, I think a lot of Americans are saying they're sick of the censorship. They're sick of being told what to think and what to say. They're sick of being told that they're not allowed to be friends with people they disagree with politically, and they're tired of being told by their government to shut up. Because we believe in the First Amendment in this country. You have every right to petition your government and tell them they're screwing up, and that's exactly what Kamala Harris is doing. And that's why Bobby Kennedy endorsed Donald Trump. That's why Tulsi Gabbard endorsed Donald Trump, because we believe in persuading our fellow Americans and not silencing them. And that is a big difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. You hear these people talk, and Governor Walz mentioned this yesterday. He talked about you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. And you know what that line is from a disgraced Supreme Court opinion. We believe that the solution to bad ideas is to debate them and persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris believes the solution to things she disagrees with is to silence you and to shut you up. It's disgraceful, it's anti-American, and we will not stand for it in Donald Trump's political movement. So I want to close before I take some questions from the media, and I just want to remind you that we got to look through Kamala Harris's lies. She talks about all these great plans that she has. And look, some of them she straight up copied from Donald Trump. So some of them I'm like, Kamala Harris, that doesn't sound that bad. You went on DonaldJTrump.com and copied and pasted it. She's going to put on a red MAGA hat next thing you know. But look, if you've got all these great ideas, Kamala Harris, I've got a message. Why don't you try them right now? Because you're the sitting vice president and you haven't done a damn thing for American workers and the American people. The sitting vice president cannot say on day one, we're going to tackle the affordability crisis. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and your policies caused the affordability crisis. She can't say on day one, we're going to make the borders more secure, because she's been the border czar for years, telling Americans that the border is secure. She ought to do something about it now instead of lying and gaslighting the American people. She talks about restoring American leadership to the world and bringing back peace and stability to the world that has turned to chaos. And when she says that, I say, Kamala, I've got a really good idea for how we can bring peace and stability back to the world. Vote for Donald J. Trump and bring him back to the Oval Office. So to all of you who are here, and all of you that are watching or will see some of the clips of this later on, I just want to tell you that we have the greatest country in the history of the world. We've got flying in here, and trust me, as a Buckeye, it is hard to admit it, you have got one of the most beautiful states in the entire United States of America, especially this time of year. I love being in Michigan. We've got the best natural resources, the best people, the best workers, the best history anywhere in the world. And I know a lot of people feel like the American dream is out of reach. I know a lot of people feel like it's gotten way too expensive to afford food and energy. It's gotten way too expensive to pay the rent. And I just want to tell you, please do not give up on this country. Because as broken as the leadership of this nation is, it's going to change in 33 days, but only if we get out there and work for it. So to every American out there, we're going to bring back the American dream. We're going to bring back affordable groceries. We're going to make housing and rent possible to afford for normal American citizens. We are going to cut the border crap out and close down that border. We're going to bring the American dream back, but only if Donald J. Trump is back in the White House. We got 33 days. Let's make it happen. Let's fight for it. Let's work for it. And we're going to make him the next president. So let's take a few questions from the reporters, and I always like to start with the local reporters first, and then we'll do the national folks if we got time afterwards.
Senator Vance, first of all, congratulations on last night's debate.
Thank you.
I did get a chance to speak to some
fun.
voters here before you stepped on stage. I spoke to Jeffrey and Bert, and they said that they loved how the debate was civil and policy focused. But then I also got some opportunity to speak to voters outside of the event, and I got a question from Robert from Pontiac, and it's a two-part question. I hope you can answer it.
Sure.
So the first part is, with issues where Americans are divided, if elected as the next vice president, how will you bring folks together, especially from the other party? And if there is an issue you disagree with Donald Trump, how will you make your voice heard for the people?
Well, so you said the person who asked that question is named Robert?
Correct.
So my message to Robert on the first question is, look, I think that the reason this country feels so divided is because of failed leadership and nothing else. You talk to, and look, I genuinely believe this. With a lot of folks who are going to vote against me and Donald Trump, there are a lot of people out there who are fundamentally good human beings, but the leadership of the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris, is an absolute disgrace. And here's the way, again, why do we have so much division? And why do we have so much rancor in this country's political debate? It's because Kamala Harris and her allies are trying to silence the American people rather than engage with them. When you try to censor your fellow citizens, when you try to shut them up, you breed division and hatred. Donald Trump and I are going to bring this country back together by encouraging the free exchange of ideas and this idea that our leaders ought to persuade their fellow citizens, not try to shut them up, which is what Kamala Harris wants to do. Open this country up. Open up the dialogue and open up the debate, and that is how you bring American citizens back together in these divided times. But on the second question about what do you do when you disagree with Donald Trump, the answer is, first of all, Donald Trump is at the top of the Republican ticket. He will be the next president of the United States. I've got two responsibilities. The first is to support the president in enacting an agenda that I believe is going to lead to rising take-home pay and lower inflation for American citizens. That's number one. But of course, if I disagree with the president, it is my responsibility to talk to him about it and to offer honest counsel in private. And one of the things that I love about Donald Trump is that he takes advice and feedback from everybody. As much as, you know, it's funny, when the president, the only conversation that he and I ever had about whether I might become his vice presidential nominee was the Saturday before the convention. If you remember, that was the Saturday where he was shot in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I saw him that morning in Florida. We ended our conversation. He hopped in a plane and flew to Pennsylvania, where, of course, an assassin nearly took his life. And you know what the president told me? He said that he talked to everybody about who his vice presidential nominee should be. And I think that's one of the great things is he's willing to take feedback. Of course, he makes the final decision, but he's willing to take inputs from everybody. And he even said that he was talking to the Mar-a-Lago gardener about who the vice presidential nominee should be. And I said, well, sir, what the hell did the Mar-a-Lago gardener say? Because this affects my life. I'm very curious what these people you're talking to are saying about this very important decision. But I think that it's one of the great things about his leadership style is he is in charge, he is in command, but he makes decisions after getting as much information as possible, and that's how the country should be led. You know, it actually raised an important question, you know, Robert, and I know, of course, the journalist who's asking this question, look, one of the things that people in D.C. say about Kamala Harris, and it's Democrats that say this, it's people she served with in the Senate, and it's also Republicans, and of course they say this in private, but they'll say Kamala Harris is very insecure. She doesn't like to be challenged. If you don't like to be challenged, and you don't like to engage in open debate, you should be nowhere near the Oval Office of the United States of America. Next question.
Thank you. Charlie Langton from Fox News, WBJ here.
Hey, Charlie.
I talked to a lot of people here. They also said you were very cordial last night in the debate, and the message got through. But compare your style to Donald Trump's style, where he was a little aggressive. Do you think that Donald Trump's message sometimes is lost because of his aggressive style?
No, Charlie, look, I think, first of all, there is a media caricature out there of Donald Trump that is so different from the man that I've come to know. And I think that, you know, when he called me last night, you know what he said? He asked me how my wife was doing. And he said, you know, you just had a hell of a debate. I'm sure that you were nervous. You had every right to be nervous, but go and have a nice meal with your wife and go and enjoy this moment. Like, that's the Donald Trump that I know. People say, now look, the other thing I love about Donald Trump, and I think it's true of all of us, we can be so devoted to and so grateful to this country and its incredible opportunities, but then also be kind of pissed off that the leadership is failing this great nation. There's no contrast, there's no tension in saying on the one hand, we've got the greatest country in the world, and on the other hand, Kamala Harris is doing everything she can to screw it up. And I love that Donald Trump can do both of those things at the same time. He can go out there and talk to the American people and be warm and engaged. He can talk to a normal American citizen about their struggles in paying for groceries and housing under Kamala Harris's policies. And then he can go on a debate stage and tell Kamala Harris that she ought to stop screwing up and she ought to stop talking about solving the country's problems. She ought to go and actually do it. That's the kind of president we need. That's the kind of leader that we need. And I think his message gets through. Thank you. Next question.
Hey, Senator. Craig Mauger from the Detroit News newspaper here. You were talking about your opposition to EV mandates. My question is, do you think the government should have any role in incentivizing, providing financial assistance to battery plants, to electric vehicle plants? Michigan is poised to benefit from some of these investments. Will you allow those to go forward? Will you try to interfere with those? Thank you.
Well, look, I think there's certainly a role, and I believe this, I know Donald Trump believes this, in encouraging innovation, but there's a difference between promoting innovation and sending hundreds of billions of dollars to favored industries that make their products in China. These are two very, very different things. And here's the problem with a lot of these EV mandates is that this money was supposed to go to American workers, but Kamala Harris's IRS found every way possible to allow that EV subsidy to go to manufacturers in China and not in the United States of America. And here's the other problem with it. It's not just auto jobs that we're worried about here. Think about all the people who make carburetors. Think about all the people who make transmissions. There's an entire supply chain in the auto industry that China dominates when it comes to EVs and America dominates when it comes to gas-powered cars. So before we go and subsidize the EV industry, let's open up the American supply chain for that industry so that American workers and American consumers benefit. All of the minerals, all of the rare earth materials, a lot of the battery technology, a lot of the supply chain for these electric vehicles is made in China. And with the one hand, Kamala Harris wants to make it harder to build that supply chain in the United States of America. And with the other hand, she wants to send money to an industry that's built in China. It's disgraceful, and we got to stop doing it. Invest in American workers, not in Chinese workers and Chinese firms. And I know we unfortunately have to go to our next stop in the great state of Michigan. So I'll take one more question, and then I'll offer a final observation. Then we'll hit the road.
Hi, Senator. Will Jones from Local 4.
Hey, Will.
I spoke with some elected officials or election officials last week about their concern about people who are trying to undermine our elections. Why didn't you answer the question last night during the debate about who won the 2020 presidential election?
Well, look, here's the simple reason. The media is obsessed with talking about the election of 4 years ago. I'm focused on the election of 33 days from now because I want to throw Kamala Harris out of office and get back to common sense economic policies. But I also think you can believe that America needs to have secure and free elections, but also talk about the fact that just a couple of weeks ago, Democrats in the U.S. Congress blocked a piece of legislation that would have ensured illegal aliens don't vote in our elections. If you believe in American democracy, if you believe in our constitutional republic, you should be trying to strengthen American election integrity and not weaken it. So we're going to talk about election integrity because I believe that every vote ought to count, but only the legally cast votes, and that's why we fight for election integrity, and that's why we care so much about it. Now this actually leads me into my next point, because I want to talk about, look, Democrats, whether they agree with what Donald Trump and I say about some of the criticisms we have, for example, I think that we make it way too easy for people to fraudulently vote in this country. Okay? I think that we should have passed the SAVE Act that would have ensured illegal aliens don't vote in our elections. Apparently, Kamala Harris disagrees because she fought that legislation every step of the way. But the reason why Kamala Harris should actually sign on with our pro-election integrity efforts, things like common sense voter ID, is because it gives the American people confidence in the most important thing that we do when it comes to our government, which is voting. I want every American to have confidence. And by the way, to all of you listening out there, I believe that we are going to have the safest and most secure election in 2024 that we've had, because the RNC is fighting for election integrity in a way that it frankly wasn't 4 years ago. So get out there. So I'd encourage folks, get out there and vote. And this brings me to swampthevote.com. And I want to make sure I got this right here. It's swampthevote.com. Go to swampthevote.com. Check your registration. Check your polling location. It'll give you some good information about how to vote and also how to volunteer. Because, one of the things that we're trying to do to ensure common sense election integrity is to promote more poll watchers. We've got more poll watchers in the Republican Party today than we had 4 years ago. If you're interested in helping us out and making sure that every legally cast ballot counts, then you can go to Swamp the Vote and help figure out how to get involved in those efforts. We believe in election integrity. I know all of you do, but election integrity only happens if all of us fight for it. But I got to be honest with you, I think that we're in a better shape in 2024 than we have been in a long time. We've done a lot to make our elections more secure, and what we've got to do, my friends, is get out there and vote. Never give in to the despair that your voice doesn't matter. We've got all kinds of ways to vote. You can vote early, you can vote by mail, you can vote on election day. Look, I don't love that we have election season in this country instead of election day, but it is what it is, and we've got to play by the rules that we've been given. And if we play by those rules over the next 33 days, we are going to win. We are going to send Donald Trump back to the White House, and we're going to save the American dream for all of our citizens. But let me say one final thing here. And I want to point out a couple of people that I didn't mention at the top, but first of all, you guys have got a great Republican chair in the state of Michigan, Pete Hoekstra. Pete, please wave and say hello. We've got an old friend of mine from before either of us were involved in politics, the great Congressman John James. Where's John at? I know he's around here somewhere. John's got a beautiful family, and he's been a great advocate for the state of Michigan. I hope you guys re-elect him, and I believe that you will. But let me just say this final thing before we got to hit the road. I have learned over the last 8 weeks more about this country than I could have possibly hoped to learn. And I mentioned this last night, but the thing that has affected me the most is all of the people who come up to me, and some of them are struggling to put food on the table, and they have the generosity of spirit to ask me how I'm doing, or to tell me that they're praying for my wife and kids. And it makes me realize that we have got the greatest country in the world. So I don't want us to ever get so frustrated with our leadership that we forget that we've got the best people, the best jobs, the best workers, the best natural resources. The only thing that I believe is broken about this country is the failed generation of leadership of people like Kamala Harris. So you have not just an important opportunity, we all have an important responsibility to return the people's government back to the American people, to have a president who puts the interests of America's citizens first, to close the border, bring down the cost of groceries, make housing more affordable again, and to make sure that the American people have a government that serves and fights for them. 33 days, let's get to work and make it happen. God bless you all. Thanks for having me.